Welcome back to the deep dive. We're doing something a little different today. Usually we are wading through management theories or the latest health protocols or, geopolitical shifts.
Heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff, exactly. But today we are looking at a machine, and not just any machine. We're looking at what might be the most stubborn, idiosyncratic, and, well, arguably flawed piece of engineering in automotive history.
Stubborn is the perfect word for it. It really is. It's a car that, if you just look at the laws of physics on a piece of paper, it really shouldn't work.
Yeah.
And yet, for decades, it became the gold standard.
We are talking, of course, about the air-cooled Porsche 911.
Yeah.
And looking at this stack of research we have here, we have technical manuals, buyer's guides, historical retrospectives. It's clear this isn't just a conversation about a car.
No, not at all.
It's a conversation about a specific era of mechanical history, an era where analog wasn't a marketing buzzword, it was just how the world functioned.
That's the key. That's really it. This episode is, I think, for the listener who remembers when driving was an active physical task,
Yeah.
Before traction control, before lane assist, before the car became this sort of computer on wheels that completely isolates you from the road.
Right.
The air-cooled 911 is a time capsule of a very specific philosophy, which is that the driver is the most critical component of the machine.
And as we'll find out, often the most dangerous component.
Yes, there is that. The car, it didn't suffer fools gladly. Let's put it that way.
We're going to unpack that Widowmaker reputation later, which is, just a terrifying nickname for a consumer product, by the way.
It is. It really is.
But our mission today is to decode the mystique. We're going to cover the evolution from the 1960s all the way to the late 80s. We need to explain why the engine is in the wrong place, why it sounds like a cement mixer full of bolts, and why, despite all its objective flaws, it became the benchmark for sports cars for half a century.
It's a story of evolution. And that's what's so fascinating. You don't get the 911 right on the first try. It took decades of tweaking, of fixing, and refining a concept that was, at its core, inherently unstable.
Let's start at the very beginning. Because even the name 911 was a bit of an accident, right? We know it now as this brand as strong as Coca-Cola or iPhone. It feels inevitable.
Well, inevitable, yeah.
But in 1963, it wasn't supposed to be the 911 at all.
No, it wasn't. The car debuted at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September of 1963. It was the successor to the Porsche 356, which was their first real production car. Great little car, but this new one was a huge leap forward.
And designed by whom?
It was designed by Ferdinand Butzi Porsche, who is the grandson of the founder. So the lineage is right there. Yeah. And when they pulled the sheet off, the chrome badge on the back deck lid read 901.
901. And they were committed to this. This wasn't some placeholder concept name.
Oh, fully committed. They had brochures printed with 901 all over them. They had the metal badges cast and plated. More than that, they had actually built 82 units of the car with 901 designation stamped right into the chassis. These were production cars.
And then the French intervened.
Specifically, the legal department at Peugeot. Peugeot sent a very stern, very French cease and desist letter.
And what was their claim?
They claimed ownership of a very specific trademark in France. Any three-digit car name with a 0 in the middle.
Which, now that you mention it, explains the Peugeot 205, the 404, the 505. They had completely cornered the market on the central 0.
Exactly. They basically said, look, you can call it the 901 in Germany if you want, but you cannot sell a single one in France with that name.
And France was a crucial export market for Porsche. They couldn't afford to launch a new flagship car and be blocked from selling it in Paris or Nice. It was a non-starter.
So they had a choice. Fight a lengthy, expensive trademark battle in international courts, or improvise. And this is the part I love because it just highlights that pragmatic German engineering mindset so perfectly. They didn't call a marketing meeting to brainstorm a new name like the Hawk or the Tiger.
No focus groups.
No. They looked at the metal numbers they had in the parts bin.
They literally checked the inventory.
Right. They had thousands of metal 9s, thousands of metal 0s, and thousands of metal 1s already cast. They just said, okay, drop the 0, add another one.
Yeah.
901 became 911.
Just like that. Purely to save on tooling costs and avoid a lawsuit.
It was a manufacturing workaround that accidentally created a legend. And for the collectors listening, and I know we have some listeners who view these cars as assets, if you ever find a Porsche in a barn somewhere with a 901 chassis number,
Don't touch it.
don't paint it, don't restore it, just, pick up the phone and call an auction house. Those 82 original cars are essentially winning lottery tickets today. They're historical artifacts.
Amazing. So 1964, the 911 is officially born. Now, looking at our sources, the air-cooled era is a huge chunk of time. It runs from 64 all the way to 1989 for the classic body style.
That's a quarter of a century.
And the research really divides this into two distinct visual periods. We have the long hoods and then the impact bumpers.
Right.
Let's parse this for the listener who might see these cars on the street but not know what they're looking at. What defines a long hood?
The long hood era is the first chapter. It runs from 1964 to 1973. If you picture a vintage Porsche that looks delicate, slender, maybe a bit dainty, that's a long hood. The key visual is that the front hood, or the bonnet, extends all the way down to the bumper.
There's no separate panel or a filler piece?
Exactly, and the bumper itself is just this thin, elegant strip of chrome with maybe a little rubber insert.
Yeah.
It's very delicate, very expensive looking.
These are the cars that look like they belong in a 1960s French film. Cruising through Monaco, they are considered the purest expression of the design.
Visually, yes, absolutely. But dynamically, they were. Let's call them challenging. Especially the very early cars from 1964 to 1968. These are known in the community as the short wheelbase, or SWB cars.
Okay, and in vehicle dynamics, a short wheelbase usually means agility, right? But it also implies a lack of stability.
Precisely. Think about the physics here for a second. You have the engine, this big, heavy lump of metal hanging out the back, behind the rear wheels. It's acting like a heavy pendulum.
Okay.
On a short wheelbase, the distance between the front and rear wheels is smaller. So that pendulum has a shorter lever arm. It can swing very, very quickly.
It has less leverage to stabilize itself. The front end can't counteract the rear's movement as effectively.
Correct. These early SWB cars were notoriously twitchy. Famously so. You could spin them just by hitting a patch of wet leaves unexpectedly or, sneezing mid-corner. They were nervous, flighty cars.
So Porsche, realizing their customers were spinning into ditches at an alarming rate, had to intervene.
They did. In 1969, they lengthened the wheelbase.
Yeah.
But only by 57 millimeters.
Wait, 57 millimeters? That's 2.2 inches.
It sounds negligible, doesn't it?
It sounds like nothing. I mean, 2.2 inches is the length of my thumb. How could that possibly make a difference?
It sounds like nothing, but in suspension geometry and vehicle dynamics, 2.2 inches is a canyon. It shifted the weight balance just enough. It moved the rear wheels back relative to that heavy engine. It settled the car down completely.
So it didn't make it safe by modern standards.
Oh, heavens no. It didn't turn it into a Volvo, but it made it manageable. It became predictable. It's a great example of how Porsche operates. They believe in evolution, not revolution. They didn't scrap the car and start over. They just stretched it the width of a thumb.
And the peak of this long hood era, the absolute summit, is the car that appears in every single investment guide we looked at. The 1973 Carrera 2.7 RS.
The holy grail.
Yeah.
The one that everyone wants.
Why? I mean, is it just rarity, or is it actually that much of a better car?
It's both. RS stands for Rennsport, which is German for racing sport. This is what's known as a homologation special.
Okay, you gotta unpack that term for us. Homologation.
Sure. In many racing series, the rules often state, you can race this modified car, but only if you prove it's based on a road car by building and selling, say, 500 of them to the public first.
So you have to prove it's not some one-off prototype.
Exactly. You have to homologate the design. So the RS is basically a street-legal race car with a license plate. Porsche built it so they could go racing.
So what did you get for your money in 1973? What made it so special?
Well, in many ways you got less, actually. That was the whole point. They used thinner steel for the body panels to save weight.
Thinner steel?
Yes, they used thinner glass. Literally, the windows were more fragile. They stripped the interior of any sound deadening, no radio, pull straps instead of proper door handles. And, crucially, it was the first appearance of the iconic ducktail spoiler on the rear deck lid.
Which wasn't just a style choice, I'm guessing?
No, absolutely not. That was developed in a wind tunnel. The basic 911 shape naturally creates aerodynamic lift at high speeds. The shape of the car acts like an airplane wing, and the back end gets dangerously light.
So the spoiler spoils that airflow.
Precisely. It disrupted the airflow and generated downforce, pushing the back of the car onto the road. It was pure function. And today, a real, numbers-matching 73 RS is $1 million asset, sometimes more.
So that's the golden age of the classic form. But then 1974 arrives, and the look of the car changes drastically. We enter the impact bumper era. And looking at the history, this wasn't really Porsche's choice. This was Uncle Sam.
Right, entirely. The U.S. Department of Transportation, specifically the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, mandated that all cars sold in the U.S. had to withstand a 5-mile-per-hour impact front and rear, without any damage to the lights or safety systems.
Which sounds reasonable if you're a consumer thinking about parking lot bumps, but for a car designer.
It was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Those thin, elegant chrome strips on the long hoods, they would have crumpled instantly at 5 miles per hour. They offered zero protection.
So they had to armor up.
Exactly. They had
Yeah.
to completely re-engineer the front and back of the car. They installed these heavy, thick aluminum bumpers mounted on hydraulic shocks. And to cover the gap needed for the bumper to compress, they used those black rubber accordion gaiters on the corners.
The accordions. That's the telltale sign of what's called a G-series, or impact bumper car, which runs from 1974 all the way to 1989.
That's the one. It made the car look tougher, more muscular, less delicate. For people who grew up in the 80s, this is the definitive 911, the yuppie stockbroker car from the movies.
Absolutely. But the early years of this era, specifically 1974 to 1977, are flagged in all our notes here as the dark years.
A very dark period, yes.
And this is a critical warning for anyone listening who might be browsing the classified ads and thinking they found a bargain. The 2.7-liter engines from the mid-70s have a catastrophic design flaw.
It was the perfect storm of regulations meeting, a material science problem. California passed extremely strict smog laws. Porsche had to reduce emissions, but they didn't have modern fuel injection or catalytic converters perfected yet.
So they had to find a workaround,
Their solution was to install thermal reactors on the exhaust manifolds.
which were essentially just superheated ovens designed to burn off excess hydrocarbons in the exhaust gas.
Yes, and they got incredibly hot. We're talking red hot.
Mm-hmm.
They effectively kept all that exhaust heat right next to the engine. Now, the engine case, the block itself, was made of magnesium alloy.
Oh, magnesium.
It's extremely light, which is why Porsche used it for their race cars.
Yeah.
Great for performance.
Mm-hmm.
But magnesium has a very different thermal expansion rate than steel.
And the long studs that hold the engine together, the ones that go all the way through the case and hold the cylinder heads on, were steel.
You see where this is going? So you have a magnesium case getting superheated by these thermal reactors, disbanding like crazy, while the steel head studs stay relatively rigid. The result: the studs would literally pull the threads right out of the soft magnesium case.
The engine would pull itself apart.
Catastrophically, it creates massive oil leaks, loss of compression. It's a 5-figure engine rebuild bill just waiting to happen. So the deep dive advice here is be very, very careful with mid-70s magnesium engine cars. They can be heartbreaking.
But Porsche, in their evolutionary way, eventually fixed it. They didn't just leave it broken for their customer.
They did in 1978 with the introduction of the 911 SC, or Super Carrera. The big change was they switched the engine block material from magnesium to aluminum.
Heavier than magnesium, I'd assume.
A little bit, yes, but much, much stronger and more thermally stable. It didn't warp or pull studs. The 911 SC engine is known in the community as bulletproof. These are the cars you see with 200,000, 300,000 miles on them, still going strong. It was the redemption.
Okay, which brings us to the mechanics themselves. We've talked about the what. Let's really get into the how. The defining characteristic of this car is the air-cooled engine. But looking at the schematics here, that's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? It's not just air doing the work.
No, not by a long shot. It's really an oil-cooled engine that uses air for assistance. The oil is doing the heavy lifting.
Let's break that down for someone used to a normal car. Most modern cars, almost every car on the road today, use water. They have a radiator at the front, a water pump, hoses, and channels of liquid coolant running through the engine block to absorb heat.
Right.
The 911 has none of that.
Zero water, no radiator, no coolant, no hoses to burst. Instead, it has that massive, iconic fan you see sitting on top of the engine when you pop the lid. It's driven by a belt, and it pushes a hurricane of air over the deep metal cooling fins on the cylinders and heads to carry heat away.
But you're saying that air isn't enough for a high-performance engine like this.
Not nearly enough. The real heavy lifting is done by the oil, which is why these cars hold so much of it and why they use a dry sump system. This is a term that gets thrown around at car shows by guys in polos, but it's actually a vital piece of engineering for the car's survival.
Okay, so let's define it. A wet sump is the normal system.
Yes. In your daily driver, a Honda or a Toyota, the oil sits in a big pan at the very bottom of the engine. That's a wet sump. The oil pump has a pickup tube that sucks it up from the bottom, circulates it through the engine, and then it just groups back down via gravity.
Simple, cheap, it works.
Until you drive fast. You take a normal wet sump car and throw it into a hard, long, sweeping corner. G-force pushes all that liquid oil up the side of the pan, away from the pickup tip.
So the pump sucks air.
For a moment, yes, the engine is starved of oil pressure. and they can destroy an engine in seconds.
And since the 911 was designed from the ground up to be raced, they couldn't risk that.
Right. So they use a dry sump system, taken directly from motorsport. The oil isn't stored in the bottom of the engine. There are scavenger pumps that suck it out of the crankcase instantly and pump it to a separate tall oil tank located in the rear right fender.
A completely separate container.
Right. And the main pressure pump draws its supply from the bottom of that tall tank. So no matter how hard you corner or brake or accelerate, the pump always has a constant gravity-fed supply of oil. It's brilliant. And it's why the car holds a massive amount of oil, over 10 quarts.
But this complex system creates one of the most famous and potentially embarrassing ownership quirks, the checking the oil ritual.
Laughs, yes. This catches every single new owner. Every one. If you check the oil in a 911 like a normal car, parked overnight, engine off and cold, the dipstick will be bone dry.
Because all the oil has slowly drained back into the engine case and the sump, so the level in the separate tank is low.
Exactly. So the novice owner panics, thinks, my God, I have no oil. And then they dump in 4 or 5 quarts to bring it up to the line.
Which is a huge mistake.
A disaster. Then they start the car. The scavenger pump immediately moves all that oil to the tank overflows, and you flood the engine's intake system with oil. You'll blow blue smoke for 10 miles and you can ruin your seals.
So what is the correct procedure? It sounds like some kind of secret handshake.
It is. You have to get the engine fully up to operating temperature, piping hot. Then you have to leave it running. It has to be idling on a perfectly level surface. You walk to the back, open the engine lid, unscrew the cap on the oil tank, and pull the dipstick while the engine is clattering away and that giant fan is spinning inches from your fingers.
It's a very visceral interaction. It's not passive. You have to be part of the machine's operational loop. You can't just do it in the driveway before you leave for work.
It demands participation. And that extends to the sound it makes. The notes here describe the idle sound as an angry bag of bolts.
Which does not sound like a compliment. It sounds like something is fundamentally broken.
It's an acquired taste. You have to realize that in a normal car, that jacket of water coolant is also a fantastic sound insulator. A water-cooled engine is wrapped in a blanket of liquid that muffles all the mechanical clicks and clacks of the internal components.
But an air-cooled engine doesn't have that.
Not at all. It's just thin metal fins and air. You hear everything. You hear the valves opening and closing. You hear the timing chains spinning over their guides. You hear the rockers tapping.
All of it. Completely unfiltered.
All of it. At idle, it sounds agricultural, clattery, a bit uneven. But the magic happens when you rev it. As the RPMs climb, all those disparate mechanical noises harmonize into this incredible metallic mechanical wail. It's honest. You are hearing the combustion in the mechanics directly, not some synthesized exhaust note that's been pumped through a speaker like in some modern sports cars.
That honesty applies to the suspension too, from what I'm reading. We need to talk about torsion bars.
Yes. No coil springs here, not like a modern car. If you look under a modern car, you see big metal spirals, coilover shock absorbers at the wheels. The classic 911 uses torsion bars.
Okay, what are those?
They're long, solid steel rods. In the front, they run longitudinally, and in the rear, they run transversely across the car. The suspension arms are attached to them, and as the wheel moves up over a bump, it twists the steel rod.
So they don't compress like a spring, they twist.
Exactly. They use the twisting elasticity of the steel to provide the spring force.
What does that translate to in terms of feel for the driver?
It's unique. It's often described as a bit bouncy, but in a very controlled, communicative way. The key, though, is the feedback. The common metaphor used by journalists and owners for decades is that an air-cooled 911 reads the road like Braille.
Meaning you can feel the difference between the painted lines on the road and the asphalt itself right through the steering wheel.
Absolutely. High-definition feedback. Because there is no power steering and the suspension is so direct, you know exactly what the front tires are doing at all times. It's a cliche, but they say if you run over a quarter, you can tell if it's heads or tails.
But that level of feedback requires a driver who knows how to listen, who is paying attention. Which brings us to the transmission. This seems to be the big debate in the Porsche community. The 915 gearbox versus the G50.
The great gearbox debate. Oh, yes. This splits the 1980s right down the middle and has a huge impact on the value of the cars.
So the 915 was the gearbox used from 1972 all the way up until 1986. The G50 was introduced in 1987. What's the tangible difference? Why do people care so much?
The 915 is a very old-school design.
Hmm.
It's Porsche design based on race car gearboxes from the 60s. It's light, which is good, but the shift throw is very long. It's vague. There is no spring centering the lever in the middle of the pattern.
So finding third gear from second is a bit of a guess. You can't just push it straight up.
It's more of a negotiation. You can't just jam it into gear. You can't rush it. You have to pause in neutral for a split second, let the synchros catch up, and then sort of guide it into the next gear. It's like stirring soup with a long spoon.
It's a skill check. If you rush it, it grinds and complains.
It is. And many purists prefer it specifically because it's difficult. It feels vintage and mechanical. But then came the G50 in 1987, built by Borg-Warner. It was a completely modern transmission.
What made it modern?
It had a hydraulic clutch, so the pedal was much lighter and easier to use, and it had a very defined spring-loaded gate for the shifter.
Yeah.
You could just go snick between gears with confidence. It felt precise and robust.
It made the car feel more like a contemporary car.
Absolutely. And that's why there's a very real G50 tax in the market. If you look at a 1986 model Carrera and an identical 1987 model Carrera, the 87 will cost significantly more, sometimes 20 or 25% more, purely because it's easier and more pleasant to drive in traffic.
But easy isn't always the goal with these cars, is it?
No, not at all. If you want easy, buy a Camry. The 915 forces you to be a better driver. It forces you to slow down your hands and perfectly coordinate your feet with the clutch. It's rewarding when you get it right.
Speaking of being a better driver, we have to talk about the physics. We absolutely cannot do a deep dive on the 911 without addressing the Widowmaker reputation.
The dark side of the pendulum.
This is the stuff of legend. You read stories about doctors and lawyers buying these cars in the 70s and 80s and wrapping them around a telephone pole a week later. Why was it so dangerous?
It all comes down to weight transfer and the location of that engine. So the engine is behind the rear axle. When you accelerate in a straight line, all that weight sits on the rear tires, giving you incredible traction.
Right. It launches like a rocket because all the weight is pressing the drive tires into the pavement. That's the upside.
That's the huge upside.
Yeah.
But when you enter a corner too fast, what happens? What does your brain tell you to do?
Well, let's play it out. I'm on twisty road. I come into a curve way too hot. My brain, my survival instinct screams, slow down, brake.
So you lift your foot off the gas abruptly. Or worse, you panic and hit the brakes mid-corner.
Logic dictates that slowing down is the safe thing to do.
In a normal front-engine car, yes. But in a 911, it's a trap, a physics trap. When you lift off the gas or brake, the momentum of the car causes the weight to transfer forward onto the front wheels.
The nosedives, you feel it in any car.
Exactly. Which means the rear tires, the ones that are already struggling to hold that heavy engine in line against the cornering force, suddenly lose their downforce. They get light.
And because that engine is a heavy weight at the far end of a lever,
momentum takes over. The heavy rear end swings around violently like a pendulum. It's called lift-off oversteer. And in an old 911, it happens faster than you can possibly react. You spin, usually backwards off the road.
So the solution, counterintuitively, is to override your most basic survival instinct.
The golden rule of classic 911 driving. Don't lift. You have to learn to do all your braking in a straight line before the turn. Once you turn the steering wheel, you must keep your foot on the gas. A steady throttle keeps weight on the rear tires and keeps them planted. You literally have to steer the car with the throttle as much as the wheel.
That is a massive mental hurdle to overcome. You're fighting your own biology. Your brain is screaming, "We are going to die, stop!" And the car is demanding, "Accelerate to survive."
That's the thrill, and that's the terror. The car doesn't suffer fools. It demands that you understand the physics.
Yeah.
You can't just drive it on autopilot like a modern car with stability control.
Let's move to the ownership experience because it's so much more than just the driving. There are all these little secret handshake details that 911 owners love, the things that make you feel like you're part of a special club.
The quirks, yes.
Starting with the ignition key. I get in, I reach to the right of the steering column, where it is in 99% of cars. And there's nothing there.
It's on the left, to the left of the steering wheel.
Why? I mean, is it just Porsche being deliberately different?
No, like everything else, form follows function. It's a direct callback to endurance racing at Le Mans. In the old days, the race began with a standing start. The drivers literally stood across the track from their cars.
A foot race to start the race.
Exactly. When the flag dropped, they had to run to the car, jump in, and start it as fast as possible. Porsche realized that if the key was on the left, the driver could be turning the engine over with their left hand at the same time as they were using their right hand to put the car into first gear.
It's a simultaneous action?
It saved maybe a fraction of a second. But in racing, a fraction of a second is everything. And they kept it on the production cars as a nod to that racing heritage.
That is so cool. So every time you start the car to go get milk, you're reenacting a Le Mans start.
You are, whether you know it or not.
Then there are the pedals. They don't hang down from under the dash. They are hinged at the bottom and grow out of the floor.
Floor-hinged pedals, yep. Like an old organ or a Volkswagen Beetle, which shares its DNA. It feels weird at first. The arc of the pedal is different. You push more forward than down, but it's designed perfectly for the heel and toe downshifting technique.
Explain that.
It's where you're braking for a corner with the ball of your right foot, but at the same time, you pivot your heel to blip the gas pedal to match revs for a smooth downshift. The floor hinge pedals make that pivot incredibly easy. It facilitates the dance of your feet.
And finally, the smell. We have a note here about the Porsche smell. Can we even describe a scent in an audio format?
Well, we can try. It's incredibly distinct. If you blindfolded me and put me in 10 different classic cars, I could identify the 911 instantly just by the smell. It's a cocktail. First, you have the smell of old, high-quality German leather, which smells different than Italian or American leather.
Okay.
Then you have the pervasive warm smell of hot oil, because the main oil lines run the length of the car right through the rocker panels inside the cabin.
So the car's cabin is basically a heater for the oil lines.
Effectively, yes. And finally, you have just a hint of unburned hydrocarbons, a faint smell of gasoline, because these older mechanical fuel injection systems always run a little bit rich.
So it smells like machinery.
It smells like work. It smells like a well-used garage. It's intoxicating to people who love these cars, and probably a bit concerning to anyone else.
Before we wrap up, let's get into the brass tacks, the reality of buying one. We mentioned the magnesium engine danger, but there is a bigger, more common enemy, one that eats these cars from the inside out: rust.
The tin worm, yes. The timeline of galvanization is the single most important date a prospective buyer needs to know. It's everything.
Give us the cheat sheet. When did things change?
Okay. Pre-1976, no galvanization at all. These cars were bare steel under the paint. They rust aggressively and they rust everywhere. Floors, battery trays, suspension mounts, the kidney bowls under the B-pillars, the area around the headlights. If you buy a cheap long hood 911, you might just be buying a pile of iron oxide held together by paint and hope.
Okay, so then, 1976.
In 76, they introduced partial galvanization. They dipped the lower half of the car's body. So it's better, but the roof and upper sections are still vulnerable.
And the magic year.
1977 onwards. For the 77 model year, the bodies were fully hot-dipped galvanized, a complete zinc coating on all the steel panels. This is a huge reason why you still see so many 1980s 911s on the road today. They were chemically built to survive. If you want a lower stress entry into classic ownership, buy a post-77 car.
One more mechanical nightmare I saw in the notes: broken head studs. That just sounds painful.
It is painful for your wallet. We mentioned the head studs pulling out on the early magnesium cars, but on the later aluminum cars, specifically the 3.0-liter SC models, the studs themselves can corrode and snap.
Why do they snap? What are they made of?
They use a special steel alloy called Delavar, which was meant to have a similar thermal expansion rate to aluminum. But sometimes moisture gets in and causes galvanic corrosion, and they become brittle and just snap. When they break, the cylinder head comes loose from the engine block.
How would you know if that's happened? What's the telltale sign?
You listen. If you're test driving a car and you hear a distinct flapping noise under acceleration, it sounds almost like a playing card stuck in bicycle spokes. That's an exhaust leak caused by the cylinder head being loose.
And that means a full engine rebuild.
Usually, yes. It requires dropping the engine completely out of the car and replacing all the studs. It's a big, expensive job. So listen for the flap.
That's a great tip. Let's try to summarize the performance here before we close. We've talked about how it feels and how it breaks, but was it actually fast, even by the standards of its day?
Oh, yeah. Let's use the benchmark. The 1984 Carrera with a 3.2-liter engine.
Okay. What are the numbers?
The engine is a 3.2-liter flat six. It made about 231 horsepower in Europe, the rest of world spec. The U.S. version was choked a bit by catalytic converters and distant tuning, so it made about 207 horsepower.
207 horsepower doesn't sound like much today. I mean, a modern Honda minivan has nearly 300.
True. But a modern minivan weighs 4,500 pounds.
Yeah.
This 1984 911 weighed 2,660 pounds.
Incredibly lightweight.
It's a featherweight by modern standards. So the power-to-weight ratio was fantastic. 0 to 60 miles per hour is about 5.4 seconds.
That is genuinely quick. Even by today's standards, that's respectable. That will keep up with a lot of modern traffic.
Absolutely. And for context, in 1984, that was quicker than the Ferrari 308, the Magnum PI Ferrari of the same era.
So it was a giant killer, a relatively unassuming car that could punch way above its weight.
Absolutely. And with a top speed of 152 miles per hour, it was a serious Autobahn stormer. It wasn't just about twisty road handling. It had real serious pace.
And it did all of that without traction control, without ABS, without power steering.
Just you and the machine.
Yeah.
And believe me, 150 miles per hour in a classic 911 feels like atmospheric re-entry. 150 in a modern car feels like you're playing a video game. The sense of engagement is on a different planet.
And that's really the core question here, isn't it? We've spent this hour listing things that sound like flaws. The heating system barely works and smells like oil. The engine wants to spin you into a ditch if you lift your foot at the wrong time. The gearbox is vague and needs to be coaxed.
On paper, it's a disaster. It's a collection of bad ideas.
Right. If an engineering team designed this car today, they'd be fired. But somehow, these flaws, these challenges, created the most celebrated and beloved sports car in history.
I think it's because those flaws create character. Perfection is boring. A modern car that does everything for you perfectly is efficient, but it's cold. It's an appliance. The air-cooled 911 is warm, it's flawed, it challenges you.
It demands that you learn. You have to learn the shift pattern. You have to learn the physics of the weight transfer. You have to learn the oil checking ritual. You have to become a better driver to master it.
And that learning curve creates a deep bond. When you drive an air-cooled 911 well, when you nail a perfect heel-toe downshift or hold a perfect arc through a corner, you feel a sense of accomplishment that you just don't get from pressing a sport mode button.
It's a relic from an era where the driver was assumed to be the most critical component of the car. It assumes you are competent and it rewards that competence.
Exactly.
So here's the thought I want to leave everyone with today. We live in a world that is rushing toward automation. Cars drive themselves. They park themselves. They have systems designed to save us from our own mistakes.
We are becoming passengers in our own cars.
Right. So does the progress of the automobile, the addition of power steering, water cooling, computer stability programs, does all that convenience actually ruin the driving experience? Or does the bad engineering, the flawed engineering of the air-cooled era actually create the perfect, most engaging relationship between man and machine?
That is the question. Is easier better? Or is harder, more rewarding actually better?
I think I know where the 911 owners stand on that.
I think they'd say the struggle is the whole point.
Thanks for taking this ride with us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Drive safe and don't lift.